Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Governmental Affairs Committee. We're happy to have you here today. If anyone wants to speak on any of the bills, there is a sign-up sheet up front here on the table. Please come forward and sign it. Before we get started, we will have a word of prayer from Representative Saines.
Let us bow. Dear Lord, we come to you humbly, asking for your gifts, and as we discern policy that is good for all Georgians, we pray for those in Ukraine as they face untold turbulence in their lives, and we pray for a peaceful and quick resolution in that. In your name we pray, amen.
Thank you very much. All right, we will start. Senator Mullis, if you would come forward, you have a little bill for us. You can go to the podium, that'd be great.
Madam Chairman, thank you so much for allowing me to come before this amazing committee that you run.
Yes.
I am just impressed and grateful and all the other things to say. Well, since Representative Sain just talked about Ukraine in his prayer, here's another good way that we can send a strong message to Russia and all their bullying and killing innocent people in Ukraine. This bill simply prohibits any state agency to go in contract with a Russian government-owned or operated company. That's it. Of course, if they give false information, they're a big fine and it gets bigger and so forth. But that's what the bill does. Be glad to answer any questions. And your subcommittee talked about this bill and went through it pretty strongly.
Thank you very much. We have a question here. Representative Gullett.
Thank you, Chairman. Senator, appreciate you being here. I do have a question in subcommittee. I think Representative Montahan, who's presented that bill, and I can't say he did it justice for you. I'm gonna tell you that. He did try to do his best emulation of you, though.
Oh,
and
that's kind of scary.
But I appreciate the bill. I'm just, it was funny. We did talk about when it was starting, what that meant for future bids going forward. And I think it's a good bill, and I appreciate you bringing it.
Thank you. And I would also, Madam Chair, this passed unanimously in the Senate, and I was a little surprised and honored that it did too.
Thank you for bringing this bill.
Thank you.
I have no questions online.
Okay.
Let's see, we do have a question here.
Just at the proper time, want to make a motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Online? Okay, we have anyone opposed?
Aye.
Okay, your bill passes. You're
Thank you
on
very
to
much.
rules.
I'm honored.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Who is, Senator, who's going to be carrying the bill for you?
Well,
Are you looking for someone to carry it for you?
Representative Montahan said he'd do it,
Okay.
but whatever the committee feels is better, that would pass the bill.
It's your
I mean,
choice.
look, he's my redneck Iranian friend, so he might be the perfect one for this.
He sounds like it.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay. Is Senator Robertson here? He has a bill to bring forward too. Okay, let's go with Senator Kennedy. You're bringing us Senate Bill 534.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon. Happy to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate being here and the chance to present. I also appreciate, Madam Chair, you allowing Chairman Gaines to present to the subcommittee on Monday when I was not available. So with that in mind, I'll sort of be brief if that's all right with the committee, but
fine.
happy to answer any questions. I know the subcommittee heard the details of the brief and also heard some testimony from the Secretary of State's office, who came and testified and in support of this bill and remain in support of this bill. But in essence, this is a good bill to make sure that we continue to have reasonable statutes and regulations regarding our charities in the state of Georgia. As we know, many of our businesses have been hurt over the last couple of years with COVID, and that's not been limited to businesses. It's also affected charities. And this is just to make sure that going forward, that charities are not subjected to regulation or things that harm or hamper their ability to help the good people that they try to help and expend the resources in that direction, no more than what's necessary as determined by the legislature. I understand there's been some changes made from the initial bill, and I've seen those, and they're certainly fine with me, and I hope they're fine with this committee. With that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we do have a question. Go right ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I asked this in subcommittee and I always look at a bill and I say, what prompts the bill? So is there something that's happened that prompted this bill, or why now, I guess is my question.
Thank you, Representative. And that's a good question. I think the why now is two things. One, it's realizing where we are coming hopefully out of COVID-19 and all of the impact that that's had on charities. Their resources are strained. Their ability to do and accomplish their missions are strained. But it's also looking secondarily prospectively to make sure that with regard to, they live in a regulated world, of course, like we all do, and to some extent, but it's just to make sure that those that the wishes of the legislature with regard to what charities have to provide to the government in the way of paperwork or information is that which is prescribed by the legislature and is in conformity with that versus a regulatory agency or body that might want to expand that unnecessarily. It's just keeping that in check, really.
Do you have any further questions? Representative Anderson or
Just me.
Williams? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank you for bringing the bill. I have complete confidence in Nulia Zaharis and her staff. They do a fantastic job. I've seen them in other parts of their work, and I appreciate the hard work that they do. And thank you. I think it's probably just keeping up with the times and modernizing and streamlining everything. But thank you very much, Senator Kennedy.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate that comment. And I think your words are better than mine, just keeping up with the times. Yes, sir.
Do we have any other questions or comment? Is there anyone online? Okay, I will ask, what is the pleasure? Okay, we have a move and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Online? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, your bill passes. And who is going to be carrying it?
Chairman Gaines.
Chairman Gaines.
Yes,
Thank you
ma'am.
very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Glad to be with you. Thanks
Thank
to the
you.
committee.
Thank you. We're going to be at ease for a moment, and so please just rest at ease for about 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you would, Chairman Robertson, we appreciate your getting here. I know it's a tight schedule for all of us.
Yes, ma'am. I think you and I suffer from the same problems today.
Yes, we're happy to have you here today, and please present your bill.
I appreciate your time. I appreciate the patience of the committee. I'm here today to discuss Senate Bill 152. It's LC number 364618. This bill passed out of the Senate last session, passed out of this committee and went to rules where my good friend, my state rep, who I am proud to be his senator, said I was having a little too much success last session. So he figured he'd have me one I could come back on and try to have for dessert, I guess. But what this does is it changes the pledge of the Georgia flag by adding one single word. A philosopher that we're all aware of, Aristotle, came up with something called the cardinal virtues and passed it on to Plato. And in doing so, in I think it was 1952, the pledge to the Georgia flag was created, which talked about wisdom, justice, and moderation. And those are three of the four cardinal virtues. The one cardinal virtue that was left out was courage. And I think if no time is better than the state of Georgia as we've powered through this pandemic and all the other issues we've had, that for knowing that our young children, knowing that adults, when they stand and pledge to our flag, that they're able not only to do the wisdom, justice, moderation, but to add courage to it. And there's always concerns when you start changing something like this. Our state seal has the three words that we say in the pledge on them today. And in some situations, people will ask, well, I see, wisdom, justice, and moderation on the banner that wraps around the arches that represents itself on our state seal. But many times what they fail to see is the guard or the paladin, the soldier that's standing there with his or her blade out, ready to defend the great state that we live in. And that individual symbolizes the fourth leg of the cardinal virtue, which is courage. And so as minor of a piece of legislation as this may see, I think it sends a strong message here in the state of Georgia in 2022 with what's going on around the world and what's going on in our country, that there's no better time than to reemphasize the backbone and courage that exists here in the Peach State. And I would greatly appreciate your consideration once again for this legislation.
Thank you. We will have a couple of questions. Representative Sane.
Thank you, Senator, for bringing this back. I'm glad, through Representative Gollett, we got to see you again. Since this bill is about allegiance, what would you say if you had to choose allegiance between House Ways and Means and House Government Affairs? Would you align more?
I think I would have to go with Government Affairs every time.
Oh.
I think there are times that we find ourselves trapped in situations that we must power through, struggle, and escape from. And I'm glad I was able to do that today.
We appreciate that.
Thank you. Let's see. I'm not sure. Chairman Williamson? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, is it not true? I just left a Ways and Means meeting bill. I thought I left before you, and you were presenting the bill, and how in the world did you get here ahead of me?
I possess more fear than you did, because Madam Chair probably wouldn't be as tough on you as she would be on me being from across the hall and you being from the same
That's a
chamber.
fair statement.
But you did make really good time. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Representative Gullett?
It took a lot of courage to say that government affairs is, your priority. So thank you for that.
Truth is the truth. Ms.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone online with a question? We don't see. I see no more questions. Do we have something do we have a motion? Have a motion to pass and a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Online?
Aye.
Aye.
Your bill passes. You are on. And
Aye.
who is carrying your bill?
Thank you. It will be Representative Gullett will carry it, since we favor so much and people will not be able to tell us apart.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I'll see you shortly.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. We have let's see, Senator Walker, are you here? Okay, please come to the podium. Thank you. Your podium or the table, whatever you would like. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. I bring to you Senate Bill 337, LC 280365. This bill addresses what I think is fairness and fiscal responsibility for your local governments and good stewardship of the taxpayer money. I presented this in subcommittee already, and it allows for indicted local elected officials that are indicted for a felony and go through the process with the commission for it to be determined if the felony is of the nature that they need to be removed from office. And then they are removed from office. It would suspend their pay until the adjudication of the trial. If they were found guilty, of course, they would not get the back pay. If they were found innocent, they would, and their compensation would be reinstated. We passed a similar measure for constitutional officers and legislators. That requires a constitutional amendment. It was Senate Resolution 134, and that'll be on the ballot in November for the voters to decide on that. This bill for local elected officials did not require a constitutional amendment, so it was run separately. Last year, it was over in your body as Senate Bill 218, and it got some real good language added to it, and I wasn't able to get that across the finish line last session, but I'm hoping we can get that part of it done too this session.
All right, we do have a question. Is that Chairman Fleming?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator, my eyes directly went to lines 45 and 46 because that's where you're making the changes. And I was also trying to listen to you, and I understand that if the public official is reinstated to office, then they get their back pay back. And that sounds logical.
Yes, sir.
But the change we're making here is that we're saying that they don't get their pay while the trial, so to speak, is ongoing. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the thinking is the local government has had to hire somebody to do what they would normally be doing. And so they're paying somebody to do the job that they would otherwise be doing.
And you made the statement that they're found not guilty, then they would get their pay.
That's my understanding. Yes, sir.
So as I read this, it says on line 47, if the public official is reinstated to office, or he or she shall be entitled to receive any compensation withheld under the provisions of this code section. And I was thinking of this scenario. Let's say the elected official at the local level has a 4-year term, and in year 2 of that term, they're charged with a felony, and it goes to trial. Well, it's not unheard of that could take 2 or 3 years, and COVID's a perfect example, but an odd example. But let's say that on year 5, they're actually found not guilty and the trial ends. Well, they didn't run for re-election when their term ended because they were under felony indictment. They might have wanted to, but they didn't try. So that would make sense. So they cannot be reinstated to their office in year 5 because they no longer belong to that office. So are they going to get their money or not? Because it doesn't say here they get their money if they're found innocent. It says they get to their money if they're reinstated to their office, and they can't be reinstated to their office after the term is expired.
I don't know, Mr. Fleming, would Representative Fleming be happy to, I'm sure you can figure out a way to fix that.
Well, I think the problem is that because we are changing from giving pay to withholding pay, the statute was never designed with that in anticipation. So just the change possibly relying on reinstatement is not going to work if you don't run for re-election and you're found innocent after that. As I sit here, Madam Chair, I can't tell you how to fix that. Stuart is much smarter than I am. Maybe he can, but it might be that my initial look is wrong. I may be missing something, but that's my question at this point.
We will rely on Legislative Council if you have any ideas on this. While we're looking at that, Representative Williamson, you have something?
sort of a follow-up on the thoughtful input that Representative Fleming just gave is, we have to operate under the presumption of innocent until proven guilty. And my only concern, and we're all very aware of some particular situations where this would have been helpful to protect the taxpayer's dollar. And I think that's the overall intent here, is to protect the taxpayer's dollar. But I do wonder about maybe an overzealous situation where somebody's indicted and then that elected official ultimately be adjudicated innocent, but in the meantime, his family doesn't have any money to live on. I just wonder about situations like that.
Well, they're not prohibited from getting another job. And there is a process. The question's been brought up. What if this is just some sort of political vendetta? Well, it's a commission that they have to go before, and it spells all that out. I think starting around line 20 or so.
Again, I applaud your intent to protect the taxpayer's dollar, and that ultimately is what we're doing. We're paying money for services not being rendered to the state. It's just, as we hit the pause button and think about a fix, an obvious fix we need to make in the bill, I just want to throw that out for consideration. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
We have Representative Gullett.
Thank you. Chairman, I applaud the bill. I love the bill. And having been in a county, as you know, who had a district attorney who was indicted and was suspended and continued to receive pay for 2 years while our county had an acting district attorney. Not only what that district attorney caused my county as far as chaos and lack of trust in the judicial process, whether the case was good or bad of what he did, every case was then doubted, whether it was a good trial or bad trial, or he made the right decisions on pleas and things. So I understand the impact that this can have on a county, and continuing to pay him as he sat, at his house, and what he caused our county to go through is just, unless you've been through it, it's absolutely terrible. That's just on the district attorney side. I'm sure it's the same with a city council member or solicitor or all the other local ones. So I appreciate you bringing this. I hope we get this fixed as far as the language is a problem, but thank you so much for carrying it. It's highly needed, especially in my county, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, getting back to Chairman Fleming's comment and question, I'm no attorney. I don't go to court and deal with criminals and prosecuting criminals and defending criminals and all that stuff. But I do think that oftentimes if you are charged with a felony, a lot of times it seems like to me that the person charged, they're not in any big hurry necessarily to go to trial. It seems like it is to their advantage to delay the trial. I think attorneys would, and so I just think this is another incentive really for the defendant to get this thing resolved, and I just don't see why we should pay them while they're waiting on the court, because there's a good attorney can get this thing delayed quite a while. But I do think there would be an easy way to say, instead of saying reinstated, you could just say found not guilty or exonerated or something like that.
I think we, based on his, he doesn't come up to the chairs very often, so I believe he has something to say. What mic are you at, Stuart? I'm going to answer. I know there's two members of the committee who'd like to speak, but I think we should address this first. What number are you? 16.
We could add in some language on line 48 to address the issue of if the, what would occur if it. So there's a series of events outlined on lines 40 through 42, which discuss the reinstatement of the official, what would allow for the official to be reinstated. during his or her term of office. And if the desire would be to ensure that a official could get back pay after their term ended, we could just add some language on line 48 after office to address that situation and include this whole line of events as well, if that was the desire of the committee.
And that's what I was thinking about too, Stuart. And I scratched this out and I'll let you hear it and see what you think. It would say, for the purposes of reinstatement as used in this code section, reinstatement may occur after the official's term of office is ended. In other words, we think of reinstatement as my office is ongoing and I get put back in. However, we could define reinstatement differently for the purpose of this code section, that being, it doesn't matter if you're out of office, you can be quote unquote reinstated for the purposes of payment. Now, I don't know if that solves it, but that's just something that I was scratching.
Yeah, that's another alternative I had thought of and didn't know which way would, be better.
My fear is that we'll put that in there and then you'll have a chance to later on this evening to read it very closely and you'll figure out why it doesn't work somewhere else because we haven't read the whole code section. I mean, that happens all the time, unfortunately, but we're in full committee, aren't we, Mr. Chairman?
We have two more questions. Do y'all want to get together while these questions get asked and see what sounds like the best alternative? Because I think I'm sure everyone's will is to move this. It's a good piece of legislation. 29, Representative Maynard.
Sorry, that was me. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I was in support of the bill. The prosecutors are the bedrock of the justice system. And oftentimes, if someone did want to redirect questions as to the operations of the prosecuting attorneys, there are certain measures that you can't do because of the way the law is just currently structured. And so I'm in support of the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Maynard. On Zoom, Representative Nugent. Representative Nguyen, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask about the presumption of innocence, which is something that is really important to the law. Would there be any potential constitutional issues with this?
Is that for me, I guess?
Yes. Are you concerned about any constitutional issues with this, given that our judicial system does work from presumption of innocence, and this is prior to a conviction?
I'm not concerned about it. No, ma'am. I think there is a process that they would go through and, I think it's good public policy. I'd let somebody in the courts decide that.
The way I think of it, and I don't know how much correlation it is legally, but I think administratively, we see it for peace officers in Georgia a lot where they're put on administrative suspension and their pay can or can't be based on that suspended, because again, you're not removing their compensation, you're suspending it until there is that ability. So it's, to me, an administrative procedure versus a punishment. But again, I'm assuming the legislative council you utilized didn't give you any issues with constitutional validity, did they?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more question, Representative Shannon on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I have a similar question kind of around what Representative Nguyen was asking, just trying to think through how this would work. So if you have a situation where somebody gets indicted, but they believe they're innocent and they refuse to resign even under public pressure, if they keep working, is it legal to not pay them? If they continue to do the job and say, I'm going to continue and do the job as I go through the court process, is that something that would be allowable? Is that legal?
So this is only for elected officials that are removed from office and they're not performing the duties of the job. And there's a process already in code to determine if they should be removed from office or not based on a grand jury indicting them for a felony.
Okay, thank you.
All right, there's one more question and then I'm going to recognize okay. All right, I'm going to recognize Representative Fleming for fixing what he started.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think what you might want me to do is make a motion to pass and then propose an amendment. Is that right?
I appreciate that.
Do pass, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a motion to pass. We have a second. All in favor?
Hold on, let's do the
Oh,
amendment.
we just need the motion. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
So, all right, second motion.
Mr. Chairman, Stuart and I were able to work on some language and he's got it written down. And if you'll allow him, he will read it in the appropriate place for an amendment that I will make.
All right, Legislative Council.
So at the end of line 49, we're going to be adding a new sentence to read as follows. For the purpose of back compensation only, reinstatement may occur after the expiration of the, make sure I'm using the right term, of the officer's term of office. And that's just that we're just going to add that sentence there so that the existing grounds for reinstatement can be used to calculate or apply back pay, even if the term has ended.
Yeah, and I think on the fly, that's probably a pretty good shot at it, Mr. Chairman. So I'll make that motion.
Could you restate the motion, please?
The language.
The addition, yeah.
Just the wording of the addition.
Yeah, for the purpose of back compensation only, reinstatement may occur after the expiration of the officer's term of office.
So by putting only in there, we're trying to emphasize that reinstatement, that sentence doesn't mean you can be reinstated after someone else has already been elected. It's for the purposes of compensation only. And prior to that, there's a big discussion about how you get compensation if you are found basically innocent. So I think reading that in total will work towards resolving the little glitch.
I appreciate it.
So we have a motion and a second for the amendment. I'm going to go ahead and take the amendment and then we'll do further discussion because we have an audience member who'd like to speak. All in favor of the amendment as aligned by Legislative Council? Aye, say aye. Those on Zoom?
Aye.
Any opposed in person or on Zoom? All right, the amendment carries and we will now recognize Robert Smith from the Prosecuting Attorneys Council.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Smith. I'm General Counsel at the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. I just wanted to briefly speak and wanted to clear up a bit of a misperception that came out during the subcommittee earlier this week of when this bill was brought up. When this bill came through the Senate, I was present, and afterwards I had an opportunity to speak to the sponsor, and I want to make sure I apologize to him for giving him a misperception. The Prosecuting Attorneys Council is, we don't particularly like this bill. It's not that we have no position on this bill. It was characterized that the PAC doesn't particularly like this bill. That is not accurate. We have taken no position. The DA's Association has not, and neither have the Solicitor Generals. This is, it's simply the question I asked was that, and as members of this committee also asked, judges are the only group of elected officials that are not included in this. And I approached the sponsor and asked that question, the same question that several members of this committee posed to him at the subcommittee hearing. It was not a question of, opposition or anything like that. It was just a question about why judges were excluded. And he gave an answer, and I apologized to him publicly for making him think that PAC was taking a position on this bill because we weren't. If I might have a moment to also point out two things that may be helpful to your discussion. The first is that this statute in 1988 was found to be constitutional. The name of the case is Eves versus Harris, and says that removing an elected official because they've been indicted and the crime that they've been indicted for has an impact on their ability to function as an elected official. And then the governor has convened the commission who has recommended to the governor that the official be removed. All of that complied, and as such, it was constitutional to remove the officer for a limited period of time. And that's the other point I want to make out in your discussion. If you drop down and look at subparagraph I here, if the the elected official is removed from office by this panel, by the governor and this panel, under the advice of the panel, then the prosecutor has 2 terms of court, the current one and then the next one, to try the case. And if they do not, then the elected official is returned to office. So I know that there has been some discussion about getting back pay and things like that. And that's one thing to be conscious of, is that we have, as a prosecutor, we have 2 terms of court, the current one and the next one, to try the case, or the official goes back into their office. And just for instance, for those who aren't lawyers, the terms of court are different across the state. Up here in Atlanta, in Fulton County, it's 2 months. Whereas some places it can be a lot longer. There's places where it's 6 months. There's some places where it's actually as long as, I think, either 7 or 8 months down on the coast. So we have a certain amount of time to get these cases brought. And if we don't get it brought and resolved by trial, then that official gets returned. So that's the point I wanted to make. That basically PAC's taken no position at all. It was simply a question I asked as to why judges were not included, because we have judges that have been suspended by the governor and have not, and have continued to receive their pay, and also have basically bring up those other 2 points to help your discussion.
Appreciate that, Director Smith. There's 2 questions that got lit up in cases for you. Let's have you hold there. The way I understand it, PAC feels strongly that it has no strong feelings.
Yes, sir.
All right. With that,
thank you.
Chairman Fleming.
Thank you, Director Smith, for pointing out. that
Please,
last
I'm
part.
not director, please. Mr. Smith best.
Counselor.
Thank you.
Thank you for pointing out that last point. I think our attempt to deal with the pay and the possibility of someone's term of office running because it had been 3 or 4 years that passed did not go to any concern about the prosecutor's timeliness. It goes to lines 81, 82, and 83, where it says that if the defendant asks for the delay, the time frame to try it can be waived. So that's why our discussion focused on that, I believe.
Yes, sir. And just, but also heard some other questions. I want to make sure everyone
Sure.
understands. This isn't a case where a prosecutor can just willingly drag it out. If the defendant who believes they're
Absolutely.
innocent maintains their innocence, which they have every right to do, and demand that the state put the evidence before them, they have a right to be heard and be tried within a very short period of time.
Although I'm sure it happens some, and I know it does occasionally, but usually it's not the prosecutor who's dragging their feet.
We have the duty and the obligation.
Right.
Representative Maynard.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Smith, Counselor, is it, even though PAC doesn't have a position, do you have a recommendation for statewide the terms of court be the same?
Ma'am, that's way beyond. And the terms of court were set by this body many, many years ago. And there's a lot of good reasons why the terms of court change from place to place. And that's your decision, not mine. And I have no recommendation or suggestion.
Thank you.
We're going to take one more question, and then we're going to go ahead and proceed with a vote. Representative Roberts.
I don't know if it's as much a question for you, but in light of the discussion that we've had about the timing of when this indictment happens, and you just pointed out subsection I, what happens if they're indicted, 4 months before their term is up? Then what happens as it relates? Because it says if they're found to be innocent or they're not tried in a certain period of time, they get reinstated. So I think the timing issue that you raised, Representative Fleming, could still impact this statute. Does that make sense?
Chairman Fleming.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman, Representative. I was answering somebody else's question. Could you restate that?
So you brought up the issue of the timing of when the term ends, whether we
Yeah.
can get back pay. Well, according to I, what happens if the officer is indicted 3 months before their term is up?
Okay.
I don't know that if he can be put back in his position, there may already have been an election. So if it's close to the end of the term, the issue you raised could be.
I'm not following you because the way we structured the amendment, it would anticipate the fact that somebody would already have been elected. We put reinstatement Only as to the issue of compensation.
No, on your point, yes, but
Yes.
on subsection I guess I'm looking at because he or she automatically gets reinstated to the position.
Well, they do if the prosecutor fails to prosecute, yes. The concept, I think, there is that when the voters put somebody in office, it should be rather difficult to take them out of office, and a prosecutor, by delaying the case, should not be allowed to do that. So the prosecutor has to bring it within 2 terms of court. But I think the recognition that we discussed earlier was generally the prosecutor's not going to be the one that's slow. It's going to be a request from the defense. to
Right,
delay
but I
the
guess my
trial.
question is, if it falls towards the end of their term and we have an election while it's still legitimately pending, what happens then?
Well, somebody new is elected.
Someone new is elected.
Yes.
So then we can't comply with that to reinstate that person. That's what I'm,
Absolutely. I mean, that's always been the law. That
okay,
if someone is suspended from office and they don't run for reelection, but because there's a big cloud over them, somebody else can win that office.
okay,
And that it's always been that way. And that's one of the, and if that person is found innocent, yeah, an injustice arguably would have
I
occurred.
got you,
But
okay.
I think there's been no way to really to get around that. As we all know, usually when an indictment is brought and
Right.
a person is accused of a felony, I would think if we did the math, we would probably find in the 80 or 90% that either they plea bargain or they found guilty.
Okay,
Yeah.
and we've resolved the issue of the pay,
Yeah,
so that makes
yeah.
sense.
It's a
Okay.
good question. I just don't know if it could be resolved.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a comment or ask further question on that. Could that office not be up for election? Could the election to fill that office that person is indicted, county commissioner, District 4? So that election of county commissioner, District 4 could be postponed until
So-
the term of court?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, under Georgia law, as I'm sitting here thinking, the only entity that could delay an election would be a Superior Court judge with a proper action brought before them. So is it possible that a Superior Court judge could find a reason to delay the election? Possible. I would say it's probably not probable, though, that a judge would do that just because the current officer or the oath holder had been indicted.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to go ahead and we have a motion and a second for the bill for a due pass. I'm going to go ahead and call a vote as amended. Due pass as amended. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? On Zoom. All in favor? Any opposed? The bill carries. Who will be your House sponsor? He's a popular man. All right. All right. I think we have one more bill. Chair Lady Dempsey, thank you for holding. If you'd prefer to sit at the table or at the podium, it's your preference.
Stand up. I've been sitting down. I think
Sure.
it'd feel good.
I know we have a new substitute for House Resolution 1042. Would you go ahead and read your LC?
So 33-9132S.
All right, and all committee members should have that. Go ahead with your
Okay,
presentation.
so this is,
One moment. Who doesn't? Yeah, you should have, it was a, go ahead.
so this is a measure to start a conversation about unsheltered homelessness, and that is different from homelessness, that the goal of our state is to always find permanent supportive housing. There are efforts through HUD and DCA to actually do that. But the number of people living today in between that space and just on the streets has really grown so much, undoubtedly affected by the pandemic, but it's just a reality. If many of you, probably as you came to session earlier this year, you saw the tents on the sidewalks, and there's still many under our bridges on the highway systems. It's not just Atlanta, though. It's in each and every one of our communities. There are rural communities that are having just as much of a problem with people who actually are deciding to camp on someone else's space in the woods often. There's a lot of good-hearted effort and work to try to address those concerns, but it's time to really look at it and see many communities as well have bans on street camping. that you cannot just stop on a sidewalk and impede the thoroughfare, or be just claiming that as your home with a tent or a sleeping bag. So we really need to look at that, pull together some of the nonprofit organizations, the pathways, listen to some creative ideas that other states and places are talking about for the safety of Georgia's citizens, visitors, and particularly for the safety of those who are often dwelling in that manner that need more help. If there are any questions, I will tell you too that Polly McKinney was sitting here. She wanted to comment on her support of this. You probably have a handout there from her, and it particularly deals with the homelessness situation of children in Georgia. There are some numbers on the back page that are pretty profound, that in 2020, K through 12 students, almost 37,000, approximately 36,000 also in 2019. We have a growing incident of this during the pandemic. Truly, I heard from many as we started a conversation with the bill about this time a year ago, that mothers particularly who were homeless, didn't have a place to live, but had a car, were searching for safe, well-lighted parking lots and possibly a bathroom in a restaurant or somewhere for their children. And it didn't exist. Now, we're not in that space right now, but the problem is still big for many young people as well as adults.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand you have Ms. McKinley. She is signed up to speak. We'll
She
have her
did
go.
sign up. She had to go
Okay.
and speak in another hearing. So that is her handout and her
Okay.
information. She wanted you to know that she is in support of it.
Appreciate that. We still have a few members, and we'll go ahead and first go to members who have questions for the author. We have Representative Mader.
Thank you, Chair. It's me. I'm just in support of the bill. I'm happy to be a co-sponsor on the bill, being a representative in the metro area. And as you say, there's not just in the metro area, but it's in rural areas as well. And so one of the things that, if the committee obliges Chairwoman Dempsey to go forward with it, one of the things that I'm in particular hoping for is that we can study teens that are homeless. A lot of people don't think about that, as well as we're pushing forward in the state mental health initiatives. And a lot of our homeless individuals do have some mental health issues. So I think it's a good timing to see how we can help both stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too am in support of this bill very much. Thank you. And apparently I missed one of the hearings on the previous version, but I have looked over some of the additions and the new substitute bill. Very good, and thank you for that. And I wanted to ask you if you would consider something else, a friendly recommendation, that under 3, putting the section E, to develop specific recommendations on reducing unsheltered homelessness, camping and sleeping in public spaces, and identify best practices, laws, and resources to support short and long-term solutions proven effective in dealing with homelessness. This would just be just urging them to make a recommendation of how to reduce it instead of just putting a Band-Aid on it. How can we do it? And, for a permanent solution, just a friendly conversation.
I'm certainly open to that. I don't want to take anything away that exists there. But if we need to add that, like you say, under 3E, we can do that. I think that is the intent of the study committee. I think every study committee I've chaired, not to assume that I would chair this, I don't want to get out of my lane there on that issue. But I know that everyone that I've done, we have always not only done a report, but legislation has followed it And so it would be very impactful. If that is the will of the committee, I'm certainly open to that
Okay, thank you.
amendment.
All right. Do we have any other members who'd like to speak? If not, we're going to go ahead. Oh, we do have two members. Representative Nguyen on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Chair Dempsey, for bringing this forward. I did have also a suggestion, if you're willing. I think part of the process and the attempt to really think of how we can best find recommendations. I'm wondering if we were able to amend to include that DCA and the Department of Behavioral Health, and perhaps GMA and City of Atlanta could have a distinct role on sitting on the committee. Just thinking through the players from the state agency perspective, and then also recognizing that though this exists across Georgia as a whole, we do know that in City of Atlanta, where we do face a disproportionate number of homeless people living on the streets.
Well, and in the substitute bill, when it talks about the members and officers, it is 5 members. I should have stated that since you have some members on Zoom, I'm sorry. All 5 are appointed by the speaker. It also includes the Commissioner of Community Affairs or their designee, and the Commissioner of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities or their designee. There are 2 also options for the speaker to add up to 2 additional citizens members with relevant experience and expertise. So not necessarily GMA or ACCG, but it does allow that option for the speaker, as well as he would appoint the chairman.
Thank you, Chair.
Mhm.
We had it looks like a light went off, so that might have answered that question. Representative Williams on Zoom.
Thank you. And thank you, Representative Dempsey, for bringing this. The Cobb Collaborative, which is our family connection up in Cobb County, has really been working hard with a huge group of people on the issue of homelessness in our county. And I wonder if there's been any talk about the longstanding settlement agreement between DBHDD and Department of Justice, because I think that it did address one of the things that was supposed to be addressed was state housing vouchers for people who were cycling through hospitals and criminal justice system, and a lot of those people are homeless. And I hope we're going to use all the tools in the toolbox. And the only other thing I'll say is I don't want to. I looked at the language in 3D, and I hope we're not going to criminalize homelessness. I worry about people being sent to jail or charged in an attempt to get them off the streets. So anyway, just appreciate your work on this and any thoughts you have about those.
Well, certainly, and I appreciate the conversation. That term, to criminalize homelessness, seems to be something that is tossed about pretty frequently, and I do understand that would not be a good thing to do. It would certainly not be my intention. But there are existing encampment bans that are not being followed right now in many of our cities. So there was a blind eye. I know, like I said, if you came from the Centennial Park area, particularly where I live, over to the Capitol, most of the winter, there were an amazing number of tents that filled up Central Avenue. They were in there as tight and compactly as they could be. The someone in Atlanta, I don't want to say if it was APD or who, but in that area, finally, shortly after the new mayor came into work, they did clean that up. Now they came back, and they've come back a little bit. The tents are not there. There are still people sleeping in sleeping bags often in a lot of places. I just think cities do need to have bans for many reasons. I support that you cannot just decide that a sidewalk is your home, and that is truly not the best place for anyone to live in reality. So both sides of that conversation, I think, like I say, I think it's time for a large conversation that brings in a lot of listening to try to figure out how we can find some creative ways to deal with this reality.
I'm going to go ahead, given the time is relevant, we're outside of the time window for the committee, and we just still have individuals who'd like to speak. I'm going to pause on committee questions and go to members who have signed up to speak. Stan Jones, state your name, and if you have an affiliation, that as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Stan Jones. I'm a lawyer with the Nelson Mullins Law Firm in this government relations business. A significant part of that is around mental illness. We represent Partners for Home, which is a nonprofit here in the city of Atlanta that is the continuum of care agency for managing a range of resources from getting people off the street into supportive housing and permanent housing. Partners for Home has been working with the new mayor to address the issue. It's actually the organization that organized the efforts to get people off of Central Avenue last year, and also some cleanup on Cortlandt Street, exit from Interstate 80, the downtown connector. What Partners for Home does through its participating partner nonprofit agencies is hire homeless outreach teams who goes talk to the folks in the street and try to entice them from living in that manner. In the case of Central Avenue, there were about 50 people living in the 20 or 30 tents that were there. What we did was to find rental apartments or hotels to take the people temporarily and get them into a safer place where they had more privacy, a bathroom, sometimes a kitchen, and then find permanent housing for them. Partners for Home has been doing that for many months. We actually moved about 400 people from under the expressways, working with the Department of Transportation in the fall and early winter of this year, and then another 50 people here. So well, I would like to be here to speak in favor of the suggested amendment from Representative Williams. We would like the study committee, which we support, to be focused on solutions other than just passing a state law ban or recontracting the way in which the DCA funds are administered and others. We believe that more resources are actually necessary to solve the number of folks living in the street. And of course, most of them are here in Atlanta. People come here from other parts of Georgia. And so the way the study committee is written right now, the specific suggestions for solutions are about state bans on sleeping on the street, and the notion that the contracting isn't appropriate between the agencies that are managing the work and the state or the city governments now. It's one of the solutions that have been suggested in earlier iterations of the bill, or of this effort, I should say that, was actually focused on having 3-year contracts with bonus incentives if the number of homeless people was reduced. Well, we have performance-based contracting already. We don't have 3-year contracts under state constitutional law. And we don't typically focus on bonuses being used for the homeless outreach teams that actually do the work. So some of the suggestions of the ideas in this resolution, we think are too narrow for what we really need to focus on. We have a homeless trust fund in DCA. It's had $3 million for 20 years. It needs $20 or $30 million. But you do have an example now where cities in Georgia and around the country are taking their ARPA money from the Federal Recovery Act and using it for a range of homeless services. So it includes outreach teams, something that's actually in the speaker's mental health bill. It includes rapid rehousing in hotels or apartments to get people to a safe place, and then finding the housing vouchers. I will say readily that Representative Dempsey is the champion for mental health in this body for years. And she put her money where her mouth was in the budget that the House has passed. There are new vouchers, there's new waivers for disabled people, There's new core services for the community service boards. All those things are necessary, and they ultimately result in more people getting off the street, which is what we all want. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for the work you're performing in the organization is. Last person to speak, and I'm going to limit to 2 minutes if that's all right, 2.5, because we are over our time. Ms. Apley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you to the author for bringing this bill forward. As Sandra said, Chairman Dempsey is one of the very strongest advocates for people with mental health issues at the Capitol. I represent Enterprise Community Partners, Georgia Advancing Communities Together, Presbyterians for a Better Georgia, 9 to 5, and the Georgia Supportive Housing Association in relation to the issues of reducing homelessness, increasing access to affordable housing and permanent supportive housing for people with disabilities. So we've been very involved in this issue. As you know, it has been often said this session that the criminal justice system, the prisons and jails, are the largest providers of mental health services in the state of Georgia at this time. And House Bill 1013 works very hard to change that fact. In fact, it includes language creating, as a part of the criminal diversion task force, a study of unsheltered homelessness and the relationship with people with severe and persistent mental illness and substance use disorders, in order to find a solution other than enforcing criminal bans as a way to help them to leave homelessness. So we very much appreciate Representative Williams offering the language to Chairman Dempsey to expand the scope of the study committee to encompass the issues of proven solutions to homelessness, as well as the addition of resources. As Mr. Jones said, we have a settlement agreement, as Representative Williams, Mary Frances Williams mentioned, with the Department of Justice that has been outstanding for 15 years. One of the issues remaining is the failure to provide the 9,000 supportive housing vouchers to people who with severe and persistent mental illness who are cycling through the criminal justice system, the hospitals, and the emergency rooms. We're now serving fewer than 2,000, and we're very grateful to Chairman Dempsey for adding funding for that housing voucher program. The Senate left that money in. It still doesn't restore the 24% cut to that program that was visited upon it in FY21. But we're grateful for the add. Resources need to be added to help us to leave the terms of this settlement agreement. If we were funding 9,000 housing vouchers today, there'd be 7,200 people fewer laying on the streets in need of our help. So we thank you. We encourage you to support Representative Williams' friendly amendment. And thank you to all of you and to Chairman Dempsey.
Thank you for your testimony. We are at a point, I'll go ahead and I believe we still had Representative Nguyen. Did you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I was able to read the substitute bill to see the changes reflected in the makeup of the study committee. And I did want to ask again if we could consider adding somebody from the city of Atlanta, specifically because our new mayor has shown a lot of interest in working across the aisle to solve issues. And because we also know that the homeless population in Atlanta is one of the largest ones.
All right. Thank you for your suggestion. Let me ask the author how they feel about that thought.
So, I think what you're saying is very important. There's no doubt the focus on Atlanta would be a huge part of this. There are 5 members that would be appointed from the House of Representatives. And so the place to do that in a study committee is to ask the speaker if it passes and if we get it out in time, actually, to ask the speaker to really consider that and let him have that authority. Meaning a member, if I wasn't clear enough, a member of our own House of Representatives would be one of those, at least one from Atlanta, I would think.
Thank you. All right, we are at point, does anyone have a motion? And we have a motion to do pass in a second. Up for discussion, do we have I'll recognize, what number are you? 28?
Yes, to make an amendment to that, inserting
Go slow.
3E. Develop specific recommendations on reducing unsheltered homelessness, camping and sleeping in public places, and identify best practices.
Go slower.
You want me to give it to you? I'll go ahead and read it, then I'll give it to you. Laws and resources to support short and long-term solutions proven effective in dealing with homelessness.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed in the room? All right, in Zoom, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the amendment carries. Do we have? Yeah, I was going to see if there's just another amendment suggested. All right, well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor of the of HR 1042 as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any in opposition in the room? All in favor on Zoom?
Aye.
Any in opposition on Zoom? Carries. Thank you for your work on this. All right. With that, we are adjourned.